Hey there, my name is Magenta, and I am the ECO or Executive Creative Officer of Bloom Network. And I'm going to talk to you today about blooming and regenerative cultures. But first, I want to say thank you to Robin and all the people making Mushroom City Arts happen. Congratulations on the 8th year, and I'm so excited I get to play this year. And yeah, mushrooms are really important to me. They've been a big part of my life for a long time. They definitely, the psychedelic kinds have helped me with depression. And I'm also synesthetic. So they have really helped me kind of socially integrate with people because I've met folks who have who have had similar perceptual experiences as me. So I'm really excited to learn more about them. I really want to cultivate them at some point for food and also for dyes. You can dye fibers with mushrooms and get rainbow colors in the real world. So let's see where to start. First, as someone who talks about regenerative cultures, which we'll describe as we go along here, I want to acknowledge Indigenous peoples as the original regenerative cultures, and that I'm speaking to you now from traditional Pennacook and Abenaki lands in what's now called New Hampshire. I moved to the East Coast from California, where I was a local organizer and bloom organizer for about 10 years. I forget how long. But I'm definitely going to come down and visit you all in Baltimore at some point too. Also, I want to direct you to a blog on Bloom Network's website. Let me see what it's called here. I think COVID-19 support for Indigenous peoples or something like that. It's on our blog at bloomnetwork.org, and it has a listing of different crowd funds that are up right now for different Native nations who have been hit really hard by COVID. In a lot of places, they're not getting support from their government, the federal governments, so they're having a hard time with basic food security and all kinds of things. So some of the crowd funds include them regrowing their traditional foods, so getting seeds to do that, which is really, really awesome. So again, check that out on our blog, and definitely if you're a person who engages with medicine work and has benefited from these traditions and the plants and fungi, etc., definitely reach out to your contacts and ask how you can support right now. And always, it's a good practice, of course. So we can talk more about that a little bit later as well. So I'll kind of start off with describing what Bloom Network is. So this is also a good time to mention the 3 goals of Bloom Network. One is to inspire 1 billion acts of regeneration. 2 is to build capacity and learn together across diverse social movements. And 3 is to transfer power and resources to a decentralized global network. And so this is what we are doing as basically a media company that's led by local chapters on the ground in a peer-to-peer kind of way. Sometimes I describe it as a digital to physical social network. So everything about our online connecting is designed to get people to find and participate in local regenerative actions where they live. And we basically produce events and media to help more people connect with regenerative actions that they can do in their communities. So this is everything from permaculture and urban farming and community forestry to restorative justice instead of putting people in prison, to learning different health and mindfulness practices that we can do together, and cooperative economics. And solidarity economies and these kinds of things. So basically, kind of what we see is that across the whole planet, there's hundreds of thousands of solutions happening, probably over 1 billion people participating in this stuff. And it's just that it's hard to find for the mainstream public. A lot of these things are developing in tiny subculture niches. And they're hard to find unless you're already in one of those cultures. It's really hard to like bump into them. And the entire infrastructure of the current media technology landscape, it like disincentivizes and suppresses the signals of these things from being shared, because they're mostly happening outside of the commercial economy. And it's not like the crews doing this stuff have a big budget to hire a marketing team to buy ads and stuff. And we really need more people to be able to find these things and implement them to stabilize the climate, to stabilize our capacity to care for one another and be healthy. And we think that by connecting more of these movements to each other, like directly, we have a lot of resources and capacity together. So that's a lot of what Bloom Network does locally, and then also internationally as a global collective. We share information and resources with each other so we can more quickly help people find and adopt what's working well. So for example, in Long Beach, California, they have focused on a project called Long Beach Fresh that brings together all their local food movement people. So farmers markets, local food producers, restaurants, and they host events. They have like over 10,000 people at their various events, I think, and they've been working on policy for this. So how do you make city scale food policy that incentivizes and supports people to participate in this? So you have a lower carbon footprint, you have more people having access to really healthy food, and you have more robust localized economies. And so when we meet other food movement people in other cities and regions, we can connect them with what Long Beach has done so that they don't, if they're doing policy work, for example, they don't have to start from scratch. They can kind of piggyback what's there. And that's kind of a similar pattern that happens around our network. Meg Rivers in Columbia, Missouri is working on making a, basically beautifying a courtyard in an inner city school that has a pretty hard time with violence among the kids. And they have these really sad courtyards that are like such like beautiful canvases. So she wants to help the kids kind of come together and talk about what kind of imagery they'd like to have in there to do some paintings and murals. And she wants to coordinate and have some live music kind of scheduled in there, people volunteering to come in and play, you know, cello or saxophone or whatever. And then plant plants and flowers and teach the kids to take care of them. And for it to be an experience of, hey, we can come together and make, like, you know, sculpt the place where we are and how we are in it, and that kind of empowerment sort of thing. So that's one example. In New Zealand, in Whangarei, New Zealand, where Hannah Mitchell lives, Hannah is the community lead for the network. So she's one of the people who works on the international level as well as locally. She's also a curator and at a local art gallery there, and a child-friendly cities expert. She's a really, really, really phenomenal human. What she's doing with her local chapter, they just got a grant to do backyard soil sponge restoration. So basically, Hannah came across this guy who he talks about the importance of hydrological cycle restoration in the context of climate change and climate cooling. So what has happened there is, like, the largest conversation is around carbon, but carbon is just the easiest to measure, like, single variable in what is a really complicated equation of the flow of waters and gases through our atmosphere and our soils and our bodies of water, etc. And hydrological cycle restoration is in some ways like a deeper place to make the adjustment. And so an example of that is, so Whangarei is like a flood risk place. And so one thing that you can do is, even in a decentralized kind of distributed backyard situation, you can adapt, and I don't actually know the technical details, but this is what Hannah got the grant to, like, teach people to do, is modify the soil in a backyard so that it can absorb more water, so you have less flood water running on the surface. And so yeah, she's kind of templating that there, and that's another thing we might implement across a lot of the local chapters and like a project. Because sometimes not everyone comes in with an idea that they want to do. Sometimes they're like, hey, what can I help with? I'm here staring at my computer the rest of the time, like looking at how shitty everything is. Like I may as well, come lend my hands and meet some really cool people and have a good experience of actually doing something about this. And so we're trying to get that to happen at like really, really large scale. And I think we can. Yeah, that's why I'm still here, like 13 years later. I actually lived on gift economy for something like 5 years. Like I gave up stable housing to 100% focus on this because it just felt so important. And the capacity and leadership of these people is just so profound, like all of the local leaders and a lot of the people who are involved as participants. And then we do really interesting online programs. Our last month we did one on localized production or bioregional production. And we brought in Kevin Carson from the Center for Stateless Society, who's one of my heroes. I was so excited when he was down to come and talk with us. His books are really, really incredible. Recommend checking those out. And so he was talking about localized production in general and post-capitalist organizing and freed market organizing and this kind of thing. Mutual aid societies and the history of cooperatives, just lots of wisdom from that fellow. And then we also had Josephine Watson, who is she's actually going to law school and working on to work on the federal farm bill. But in the meantime, she's been doing a lot of regional food organizing in the Northeast with food justice, with healthy soil networks and scientists and water agencies and what's called ecosystem services and also farmers to kind of help all of those people come together and try to create a stronger fabric for kind of like state level policy changes that can support and incentivize local food. Because we have a lot of local food production capacity in the Northeast, but because of the way that farm subsidies work on a federal level, it's cheaper to get food shipped from industrialized farms in the middle of the country. And so that's an example of localized production that obviously we're seeing a lot of need for right now with COVID. And, like one of the reasons I work on Bloom is kind of reading about, but also like direct experience from the plants, from ayahuasca and from mushrooms, kind of tuning me into the ecosystems, not just locally, but at a planetary scale. That's like a big part of my practice, which I kind of groan about because it's pretty uncomfortable most of the time. Learning process of learning how to like navigate, like having that kind of sensory capacity. But it's possible that we will lose the capacity for grain production in the United States entirely because of climate change. I forget what year people are predicting that's possible to happen, but like that's an example. And like the large scale migration that's going to happen when we have sea level rise and migration, et cetera, and the geopolitical conflict, like we're already seeing that happen. And so it's kind of like this stuff needs to happen stat. And so Production Farm, that's an example of like an online session that we held to get different movement leaders together and share information and resources. We do these monthly video calls, like interactive video calls where we can learn together and dialogue as a community. And then we document what's there with a blog post and a wiki, so we can like over time build and aggregate information and share resources with each other. And what we're gradually building the integrated capacity for after the Evolver transition, Bloom grew out of an online social network called Evolver Social Movement, and had to separate from that company in order to be truly peer-to-peer led. And because we were dealing with Me Too issues with the founders, as well as race and class issues that were extremely problematic. I know for a while, Baltimore had to completely separate from the Evolver situation because it was just so out of integrity what was going on. And we spent a lot of time as a local leaders from about 2013 to 2015, 2016, really like healing as a community from those experiences. And then also dialoguing through, you know, what are the power dynamics that we've been facing within our collective, because of that corporate situation. And then also the same dynamics a lot of us are facing in our cities and in our countries. And so how do we make a peer-to-peer leadership structure that is resilient to power abuse? And so that's a lot of what I've been doing the last 10 years with this collective, is like working on the leadership, governance, and then a viable financial model to basically do what I kind of conceive of as like restorative justice governance. So again, who has power, who has access to it? And this gets us back to the indigenous leadership aspect of regenerative cultures as well, and the importance of protecting the biocultural situations there. In South America, for example, indigenous leaders are still being assassinated and their lands encroached by logging and fires and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's been an honor to learn more from those leaders and be able to sit in on webinars lately with people describing what's going on and then how they are mobilizing to push against that, and what sorts of resources that they might find helpful to support them in that. So there's a lot of like coalitions, like governance coalitions throughout South America kind of working on that kind of thing. And yeah, there's also a bunch of like really innovative stuff happening with Native leadership in terms of water policy and managing regional water situations, water access, water health, health of watersheds. That's happening in Peru and Bolivia have really amazing things happening. And also Trinity River, the Yurok people, is that right? I think the Yurok people, they are also coming up with a really rad, they're trying to like figure out what legal structure to do a kind of like ecological cooperative economic protection agency, basically. Really amazing stuff. Isaac Kinney is the guy who's working on that. And yeah, on the water front, there's also, we did a online call with these nuns from New Orleans who are making something called the Mirabeau Water Garden, and their convent got destroyed in Hurricane Katrina, and they were praying, you know, what does this land want to, like, how can we be of service to our mission? I think in that context it means they're like the area in which they are of service there, and they ended up not rebuilding the convent but making a water garden, and it's basically a water park, so it's like a beautiful place to be. But when another storm comes in, which is, you know, will keep happening there, it can absorb, I forget, like a certain number of gallons of stormwater, floodwater, and they have mapped out at different radiuses how much that prevents, how much flooding that prevents, like how much per, you know, whatever the influx is, how much less the damage will be. And they described, like, if something like that had been installed in New York City, like the damages from Hurricane Sandy would have been far less. So we're really excited about that model as something that places can adopt and implement as well. Community forestry is something I'm super, super excited about with Bloom. We meet like lots of organizers of the world who are doing this in different places, like Cambodia, different places throughout South and Central America, Southeast Asia. Even New Zealand too has some amazing community forestry stuff going on with like honey and beekeeping and other kinds of plants. But basically there are like networks of people, you know, helping buffer deforestation and creating healthier local economies and healthier local foods, like the foods that people eat. Because a lot of places people eat what's cheap, but like a lot of sugar and white bread and colonizer food, and that has disrupted their, you know, diets that they would traditionally eat and the robustly nutritious food that is in the forest. And so there are many crews that are teaching people to do community forestry. What's it called? silvopasture. I think that's what, when you have like different layers, so like trees and shrubbery and plants that grow under them, and maybe livestock like goats are really good, like in coffee, for example. Yeah, so that people have a robust diversity of crops they can grow, and so that they can sell them for higher prices than what they could for, say, grazing forest or raising forest for cattle grazing, or other kinds of like monocropping. This is happening in Africa a lot too, small-scale regenerative farms, small-scale permaculture farms, where people are providing for their family immediately, so they have like robust, healthy food to eat, but then also selling things in markets. And there's a stark difference between like monocropping. It's just like ecologically, socially, it ends up restoring a lot of social dynamics too. It tends to empower women many times, and resolve like skirmishes and things that stem from both scarcity, but also the history of colonization, where you have disrupted the traditional leadership and ecological practices of a community, which is unfortunately the case around vast portion of the Earth's surface. Being part of Bloom Network is just basically like constantly being exposed to all this incredible, amazing, inspiring work that people are doing all over the planet from all fronts. The next online class we're going to do, or like discussion, is on prison abolition. We've been encouraging people to attend a session out of the UK. It's a kind of series of panel discussions hosted by Verso Books and Decriminalized Futures, I think is the name of the organization. So definitely encourage you to check that out. And then we're going to host a discussion within Bloom Network to talk about, how can we mobilize, what mobilizations are we seeing, what are people's questions that we have, and just have a space to talk about it. Which is another big part of Bloom Network, I would say, like locally and online, is having space to like deeply dialogue and talk about what we are experiencing in a very kind of holistic container. So kind of what's missing is just this like connective architecture between all these things, and then spaces for people to like really integrate with their hearts and their minds and their bodies to implement things they can do in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their workplaces, and then this big like nerdy regional kind of innovation stuff that is happening across Bloom Network too. So really, it's like a really open invitation to plug in wherever you want, whatever scale you're interested in participating in. Where we're headed is integrating the local scale organizing, our online kind of information sharing, and then the capacity to quickly mobilize together. So once people do like encounter Bloom Network, they're able to find where to plug in locally, and also if there's an issue they care about, be able to find who else is working on that, and then join working groups or hands-on action communities that are doing that at whatever scale there is exciting for them to plug into. And a lot of what I've been working on is like a finance infrastructure for this. So right now we're learning about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which is kind of what Bloom Network is, except what that specifically refers to are blockchain-based organizations. So today it's possible to have a digital organization that you can set up in a matter of seconds. Really, sometimes it takes like 6 months to set up an entity in a country system, but you can, because there are so many online communities, it's pretty easy to set up governance systems for them where you can have transparent voting and transparent finance allocation, and a little bit more security with the distribution of funds. So I know, like in Occupy, for example, at some point there was a problem with 1 or 2 organizers who had collected money in a PayPal account, and they just kind of like ran away with it. So that's like one of the security concerns in activist communities that DAOs can kind of support with. But it also just makes it all very transparent. You can see, what kinds of proposals and initiatives the community is wanting to support, and then you can also see transparently how the thing is spending its money, and it cuts out a lot of overhead. It also offers the ability to like automate things. So for example, I think we're looking at probably doing like a unified membership across Bloom Network, just to make it easy for everybody. and then have a percentage of that go to local and a percentage international. And then it also makes the ability for finance pools. But yeah, there's just like super profound, deep friendships and relationships of solidarity and mutual learning and support. There's a guy in so-called Vancouver who's named Sophie Wing, who served as the cross-cultural relations officer for the network for a long time. And he does a lot of Indigenous solidarity work. He does ancestrally connected rites of passage work with youth and with people in general, encouraging them to connect with their ancestry and learn the practices that their ancestors have done for a long time. His family's from the Philippines. I forget the name of the specific people, but he is also a DJ and has been part of the festival world for a long time. So he's been just a really incredible leader to learn from, and just such a powerful storyteller. So yeah, as we build capacity as an international network, so that they have capacity to keep doing their local organizer work and the initiatives that they want to do. Sobi, for example, started a Facebook group called Decolonized Consciousness and Anti-Colonial Solidarity, I think, with people just like really deeply unpacking race dynamics and cultural appropriation. It was started to address the issues common in white-led movements, like environmental stuff, like festivals, some spirituality movements, because there's often a pretty problematic dynamics there. And yeah, just like unpack through it. And he's been trying to, I think they've successfully made it into a primarily BIPOC-led space. And just a lot of really, really deep sharing and unpacking and sharing of information and what people have learned and skilling each other up. And then they want to mobilize to be able to address more of those things. So put together a crew that can, really tackle this stuff in the festival world, for example. So that's something we're hoping to be able to support grant money flowing into. And again, it's like pretty decentralized, do-it-yourself sort of effort. So we're just trying to, build capacity where we can as a network and build relationships and build the infrastructure so that we can more and more exchange more kinds of resources with each other more easily, so that we are fully supported in bringing forth our offerings, all the diversity of ways that looks like. And so doing it together as a solidarity economy, as basically like a big kind of decentralized cooperative and kind of a peer-to-peer incubator to support each other through this kind of stuff. Is what Bloom Network is doing. And as far as doing a local Bloom, we just give people a use of name contract that makes it easier for local chapters to get started and reduces the admin burden across the thing. But allows us to organize together with a shared name. And you can start a local Bloom, whether you call it a Bloom or not. Some people already have a name of their project, or maybe Bloom something is taken already, is pretty generic name. So for example, in the Bay Area, there is a local Bloom that is Terran Collective, and they're building a technology called Hilo. And we use that for our kind of like text-based interaction among members in between calls and stuff. And they're building that all around bioregional regeneration. So they're slowly building out like a project feature in that for people to kind of coordinate resources around doing like a community garden build, or mobilizing to teach more people, train more people up on transformative justice, etc. They have some mapping functionality in there, etc. What else can I tell you about? Oh yeah, and there's also a chapter in Mexico, Las Mochis, Mexico. They do an annual, it's called Biocultural Festival Biocultural, I think. And they work with the Wicca Rica, is that how you say that? I recently learned it was pronounced not like I was pronouncing it in my head. Sometimes called the Huichol people. They work in collaboration with them, both spiritually and like helping their kids get bikes and stuff like that. But then also they have this kind of local entrepreneurship and healing and local food festival that happens once a year. And they're also building a network of 27 eco parks throughout the city with like 17 NGOs. I think they were collaborating together. I forget how many of them they built now, but they have like kind of a sports complex and an amphitheater, or like a zone for workshops and arts and things like that. And then they teach people how to do gardening. So they garden, I think, on the place, and then teach people to garden in their homes, on their balconies or in their backyards if they have them, as a food security thing. And they were doing such a good job at this that Jose, the lead organizer there, was asked by the mayor to work for the city, work for the mayor's office. So I haven't checked in with them in a while because they had a baby. He and his wife Liz had a baby. So they've been busy with being new parents. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our logo and what bloom means, because I think of bloom is a verb. And bloom itself is a very kind of innovative entity. It's based on how mycelium work in nature, so sharing information and resources with each other across different species to bring more health and vitality and life to an ecosystem. And blooming, I think, is the act of caring for each other, caring for one another, nurturing one another, listening deeply to one another across difference, and responding to that in ways that restore what has happened in the past and restore where we are, tired or wounded, or where systems are broken and we don't yet see the way through them to how things could be otherwise. And to create that together, to bloom, to thrive, to cultivate gardens of wellness and mutual respect and beauty around us. The logo, I don't know which way to show you guys, if it goes like this or if it goes like this here, but we call that the tracer. And eventually, when we have an app on a phone, you can like touch that button and it will open up the bloom world on your phone. So it looks kind of like a sideways Wi-Fi symbol, which is part of the point, because it's like connecting directly peer-to-peer with each other and connecting with each other in an embodied way. It comes from my experience of finding the name for Bloom Network, which was a very collective process. I think it took us like 2 years to do it. Mira Melaleuca from Australia led a really cool creative jam session that we did with like live looping music and poetry and journaling, and we made this huge grid in a spreadsheet, a bunch of different names, and we were just all like, yeah, some of those are cool, but it's just not it. And Mira and I hashed out names for a while, or I think the two of us worked on the logo for a while. But with the name, I met this woman named Nancy Zamorowski. So what do I do? And she's like, well, just ask it if it can show you a name or maybe an image or a sound or anything. Just try meditating on it. So I did, and I was staying in her loft. When I was living on gift economy, and she had like gifted me to stay in her loft for a little bit, which was really sweet of her. And so I meditated, and what I felt right away was this heart connection that I feel with all the local organizers around the world. It's almost like being in a network that is like works on telepathy. We have a really high degree of consensus most of the time, like directly feel each other. Like if someone's having a hard time, often without saying anything, one of us will reach out and just say like, hey, how you doing? I'm here, I love you. It's really trippy. But we're really connected like that. And I think the local chapters build communities of that kind of connection with each other. And so what I felt was this radiating, I don't know, love or energy or something that out from each of our hearts and out from my heart. And I felt it, interacting with the other organizers' hearts as kind of almost like ripples on a lake, like interacting and influencing each other. And it was a very structured emanating of like harmony. It was almost like a crystal bowl, like how the sound is like a very structured, like the sound wave radiates out. And it was also very much like a flower opening, like a rose blooming is what it felt like. And so that's where the name Bloom Network comes from, because that feeling was blooming. And it took me a long time to find the image for it. Mira and I kicked them around for a while, and eventually I was actually on a mushroom trip, and this image came up from the water from the Bay Area. I was doing a prayer and tripping on mushrooms and overlooking. It's like so beautiful. It's ridiculous. Like overlooking the bay in San Francisco from the North Bay, like up on these cliffs. And oh God, it's so beautiful up there. Definitely recommend tripping where you can see the ocean like from above, because the water reflecting off the waves just makes these incredible like iridescent rainbow things happen. It's so good. So I swear part of the healing thing of the psychedelic medicines is just like how just the beauty of the visuals. And yeah, so this is like a visualization of that emanation of our connectedness with one another, and the encouragement of bloom to bloom, to practice blooming, and reminding us that the actions that we take, what we emanate as people, how we are with the earth and each other, radiates out like that and ripples and influences the people and all life around us. And so while there's all these nerdy things with Bloom, there's also it's also a call to reconnecting with our like tactile and I think some people would use the word spiritual reality, and creating cultures and contexts and containers for gathering where people can interact with each other with mindfulness of that, and kind of reinforce our ability to listen in that way again. So that's what the image is about. And I drew it by hand, and then this really awesome guy, Boris Iskikov, who was a graphic designer, he made the whole logo. He made it into a really nice vector graphic, and we spent a lot of time trying to get the little curves like just right. Boris is a really good co-pilot. He's actually an ex-Air Force guy. He was a pilot in the Air Force. The person actually in the Bay Area who helped we made a festival called Pollination, and previously it was called Hive Mind, but the person who pretty much came up with the idea for that was Tori Beadle. She's a Montessori school teacher and environmental educator, but she was also an ex-Marine. So that's one of the cool things about Bloom, is like people really come from all walks of life. A lot of us are artists and musicians, but a lot of us also work in government, like locally and for the state and for federal governments in different positions. A lot of the federal people involved actually work on finance innovation in different ways, which is really interesting. But there's people who are CEOs, there's people who are like puppeteers, yeah, and lots of different kinds of healers, midwives, massage therapists, things like that. And yeah, community leaders of all stripes and approaches to creating love together and more loving, caring communities. So that's the invitation to join Bloom in that. You can join as a member on our website formally to support what's going on and access more of the online interacting and peer-to-peer support that is there. And you can participate locally with your local chapter. Go to on our website, I'm going to screen share real quick. There's a page called Local Blooms. Here we go. You go to Local Blooms. You will see all of there's Baltimore, and if you click on the page, I need to get Mushroom City Arts up there. You'll see like their recent blogs, and yeah, so you can check if there is a Bloom in your town, and if there isn't one, you can start one. There's a really easy how-to there, and you can see a little bit of inspiration if you want of what local Blooms have done so far. Yeah, so, and there's you'll find our wiki on here and the blog and the community calls. This is kind of like the dashboard of how we coordinate globally as a network. We have a theme each month. So this will guide you to that. And if you want to connect digitally. And yeah, so yeah, whether you want to play with Bloom Network or kind of pick up one of any of the mycelial threads that kind of like made visible to you here and run with it in whichever ways are inspiring and empowering to you. Encourage you to do that. And I wish you blooming and blossoming of your self-actualization and the wellness of all the communities that you care about and care for. So that's the end of my rep, and I'm looking forward to doing the Q&A with you all. All right, and a million thanks again to Robin. It's been amazing to be friends with you for a decade now, and I've learned so much from you, and it's so beautiful to hear your intelligence and your voice and the research that you've been doing, and just really happy to be on this journey with you still. And yeah, in a journey of community with so many really amazing people.
Aw, that was so sweet. Aw.
Yeah.
Welcome, Magenta. We've got her live here to answer your questions. And I saw my picture featured on the Bloom page. That was from the 2014 Mushroom City Art Festival.
At the Baltimore Free
At the Baltimore Free Farm. I just moved here. I just met you. I had no idea I was on the Bloom Network page. Oh. So cool. So take it away, Robin. What's the first question?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Magenta. Really appreciate your talk and just so excited to finally host you for the festival. We've been talking about this for years, and I'm glad that this format finally makes that possible. And the first question I wanted to ask is if someone wanted to start a Bloom chapter, how would they do that?
So the easiest thing is just to contact us through our website. If you're watching this in November, it will take you through like an automated process by then. But if you go to bloomnetwork.org/find-a-bloom, or if you look on the menu bar, it'll say local blooms. Just go to that page and it will link you to just a little bit of info about what's involved, so you have a sense of what it might look like. And then I think there's just a contact link there to get in touch with Hannah and myself, who are the community team on Bloom. And yeah, we'll kind of check if it seems aligned with you and if we're on the same page, and help you get up and running. You know, that you can do it really, really easy style, like even just join one of our online community calls with a group of people and have a discussion about, you know, what's happening on that topic locally. And you can do something as elaborate as a whole festival, or focus on a specific project. So we just try to give you a few kind of directions of inspiration to get you started, but it's really up to you about what you want to express with your community.
And bloom and blooming. So can I get what you just said, and I can type it in the chat, the link, the page?
Oh, yeah.
Ready.
Oh, bloomnetwork.org/find-a-bloom.
Bloomnetwork.org/find
a bloom, but there are dashes between the words.
Oh.
I'll mime them.
_bloom. Got it. Cool. It's now in the chat for the y'all that need a link to get that information she was talking about. Cool. And then let's see from the chat. Exciting work. I'm interested in exploring moral economies created locally with community currencies. What's a community currency? Is that like the B note that we have here in Baltimore?
It is actually. The B note grew out of the Evolver organizing.
Oh,
the second event that we ever hosted was on alternative currencies, and that helped connect things for the B note to the later launch in Baltimore.
Well, how very relevant this comment. Yeah. Any comments on that?
One, I'm curious if the B note, is it still around? Do people use it?
It has shifted hands. So it was formed like the organizing group for the B note It was Jeff Dicken who was the person that really spearheaded it and kept it going for so many years.
I volunteered. I went and talked to businesses to try and get them to start taking it. Yeah.
The thing is, it's a constant thing. So you're constantly trying to get businesses on board and accepting the currency. And I know that Jeff actually passed it on to new hands. But I don't know what the current status of the B Note is. I know that it ran many years with Jeff, the lead behind it.
It's really pretty. It has a 1, a 5, a 10, a 20. I have all of them. They're like my tokens now, but it's real money if I wanted to spend it. Mm-hmm. But I would spend it at Karma's Cafe, mm-hmm. which was right next to mm-hmm. the Food and Water Watch office I was working at. Mm-hmm. So the place that I worked at would always mm-hmm. have it. Mm-hmm. Nearby. And I had this inspiration. I did my first Baltimore City jury duty, mm-hmm. and they give you, I think, $15. I was like, man, they should just give me 15 B notes, and I can pay my parking attendant.
Yeah.
Or I can pay my lunch that I'm going to eat at. That's right there. I had all these inspiration thoughts of mm-hmm. the city should endorse it. But anyway, that's my thought there.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say that the idea of the local currency is to keep the supply chain local, right? So that your money isn't bleeding out to large corporations, and that you're working to support local businesses and supporting a local economy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the phrase moral economies. I hadn't heard that before. I heard solidarity economy, for example. It's not an area I know a lot about, but I've been kind of exploring token engineering and designing community currencies, just kind of an abstract because I haven't myself helped make one yet, but I foresee us having Bloom Network ones, so I'm kind of learning, and I would love them to be interoperable, so locally, but also moral economy and solidarity economy are both really good words for it. But there's a group called Grassroots Economics. Their website is grassrootseconomics.org. And they are doing some really incredible work in Africa, mostly Africa, but there's also a big international community around them talking about this stuff. And they use the community helps design the currency so that there is flow of the kinds of resources and various kinds of capital that they do have, even though there's not enough financial capital. So they're able to more easily circulate what they do have in surplus and receive things that they're looking for. So that's been going really well.
So I remember when I got really excited about, what are we calling it? Moral economy? Mm-hmm. Because of the whole movement to divest from big banks, because all the big banks are funding the fossil fuel that's mm-hmm. tearing mm-hmm. our world apart. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was what first I think got me into mm-hmm. the environment and paying mm-hmm. attention was when I first learned about peak oil, for sure.
Right. And you don't hear as much about peak oil now. I guess there's so many other
fires and problems and all of the things to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually talking about some more of the design solutions that are coming out of Bloom Network, I would actually love to know more about Hilo, which is social media platform that Terran Collective is currently working on. And I know they're doing a fundraiser right now for Hilo.
Yeah, Hilo is being developed now by Terran Collective, who are also a local Bloom in the Bay Area. They're really, really incredible people, and they're building it. It's a social network entirely around bioregional regeneration, for the purposes of bioregional regeneration. So that's the landscapes and natural resource flows around a region rather than a city or a county or something like that. And their crowdfund is on Flipcause. And Hilo is spelled Hylo. And yeah, it has like kind of a normal social feed, so you can chat with people like that and have DMs. But it also, they're building out project management features. So if you're building a community garden, for example, you can coordinate and say, we need 5 rakes. Who's going to bring those? We need someone to go out and buy soil or gather soil, etc. And then so that there's a mobilization component rather than just a lot of endless chit chat. They had just built out a mapping feature on there that people are starting to use. So, for example, you can find the people of color-owned businesses in your community. They're actually collaborating with a Ohlone person in the Bay Area who's helping them navigate through the sensitivities of mapping indigenous projects because some of them should not be public, for example. So their process of designing it is very collaborative and inclusive. So it's been really inspiring to see them do that on that front. And it's the tool that we're using for Bloom Network as well for communication, so that we're not supporting something like Facebook or other things that are out there.
Right on.
Yeah, so again, that's hilo.com, and then their crowdfund is on
Sean's actually showing it. He's been showing it.
Oh, sweet.
Who's Sean? He's the guy in the back that's bringing the live stream to you. Thanks, Sean. Cool.
Okay, it looks like we have a comment on peak oil. I transformed into peak water.
From fracking. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Sorry, we're reading the chat. This is our first time.
It looks so good. Sean, you did such a good job with the visuals on the live stream. And everything looks so neat and arty, and I love the ad reels and all the community projects. I'm just really inspired by Mushroom City Art Festival and so happy to get to participate this year.
Yeah, thank you. We have got a lot of great networks, connections, people that have contributed. The picture in the background is from one of our friends that he took out in the wild of a mushroom. That's actually a mushroom making those colors behind us. Cool. Anything else you want to bring up while we have Magenta live? Live.
Well, I got to go out to San Francisco last year and participate in pollination, which you talked briefly about in your talk. And so that grew out of Hive Mind. And so that was the Bloom Network Festival conference that you hosted. And are there any pieces of that you'd like to share with us?
Let's see. We designed pollination to cross-pollinate. Haha, that's why we've been using the bee metaphors. Different social movements, because I don't know about in different places, but in the Bay Area, they're really siloed from each other, the different subcultures and the different kind of facets of activism. They tend to be a little bit more siloed in white communities than BIPOC communities, which tend to have them more holistically integrated. But there's a lot of kinds of segregation in the Bay Area, including in terms of between grassroots projects and the corporate, just kind of nightmare that's there. I think that's one way of looking at the tech company situation in the Bay Area right now. There's a lot of displacement and stuff. But that festival designed to cross-pollinate wisdom across these different facets of society, because mushrooms, mixing metaphors from bees and flowers to mushrooms here, one of our goals as a network is to mushrooms, consensually and symbiotically, but kind of break down some of the harmful infrastructures and the large systems that are extractive and are starting to break down, and metabolize those resources and redirect them to decentralized networks. And also to cross-pollinate wisdom, so grassroots leaders on the ground have the wisdom and experience and knowledge of how to shift our corporate and governance structures to be more anchored to place and supportive of social well-being and that kind of thing. So we kind of also designed a think tank / design lab sort of thing with that to kind of tackle specific issues from that multidisciplinary perspective. So that's one piece of it during COVID that will continue, that will probably eventually do those labs and the festival in person again sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. It does make me very happy to discover the mycelium metaphor resonating already on so many levels of our social networks and yeah, like after your talk, we are hosting the biomycans that will also be talking about their biomimetic design that's modeled after mycelium. So yeah.
So excellent segue to getting ready for our second talk coming up next. So I want to say thank you, Magenta. You're the best. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you so much.